All right, so for Unit 4, our Stretch and Explore is going to be looking at color theory. So for getting set up for today, you're going to grab that Stretch and Explore sheet. Part of this is going to be that written component that we did earlier, and then part of this is going to be painting. For the painting component, you're also going to want to grab your palette and brush set. Some paper towel to dry off your brush, and then a jar of water. You can share this with a partner at your table. You can also have your own as well too. Just make sure you're handling cleanup. And then for grabbing paint, you're going to take your palette, you're going to bring it over to the counter by the sinks. We're going to be using Tempera paint. It's a nice, very pigmented, fast drying paint that works out really well. So you're going to take that over, grab paint. Today we're just going to use primary colors and then like a dot of black and white. So you'll grab yellow, red, and blue. I would say aim for just that circle when you go to grab those. The paint itself is very viscous, so it runs out of the bottle very quickly. I would say just bring it over and then just have about the size of a dime. It'll spread out a little bit as you get it on the palette, and then literally like a drop of the black and white. And then for the brush pack, you'll notice that you have two types of brushes in there. You'll want the blue handled brushes for the Tempera. The green ones we'll use later on for watercolor, so I would say put those in your pack for now. And then for this sheet, you can just use one brush. I think I just used the mid-size one that's in the pack for when I got started. You can choose any of these. You can also use multiple if you'd like. Just make sure that you're getting those cleaned up at the end of the hour. And then one thing to note, since most of these brush packs are new or have new replacements, sometimes they have a coating on them that makes them really stiff so they don't get damaged during shipping. As you pull those out, if they are really stiff and feel kind of crunchy, just rinse those out in the water. It'll help break that coating, and then you'll be good to paint. And then once you have your palette with paint, your brushes, the paper towel, water, and your Stretch and Explore sheet all ready, I would say start to set up your area. I'll have some newspaper out as well so you can have that underneath if you feel like you're going to be a little bit more messy. Otherwise, I would say as you get set up, it can be helpful to have your palette and the jar of water closest to your hand that you work with. So I'm left-handed, so I have my palette and brush on that left side. If I'm right-handed, I would switch that over to make it a little easier. And then as you start on the sheet itself, I would say start in with just those primary colors. So I'm starting in with blue. Instead of starting with blue and then working through that whole color wheel, I would say instead think of where else you need that on your sheet. So I know I'm going to use that for primary colors. I'm going to use that for that secondary colors section with thinking of which colors I use blue to mix. And then I'll also use that for that warm and cool section. And then it can also be an option for the monochromatic as well, but I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then a couple things to note for you. As you get this filled out, just keep in mind I'm looking at that you have and you're demonstrating a basic understanding of color theory and your knowledge. I am not looking at how perfectly you're filling in these squares. So if it does go over the edges a little bit, don't worry about it too much. And then just as you go through, continue to work through. Like I mentioned, I'd say start with your primaries, get those established in those key spots all at once. And then once you have those all established, then go in, mix your secondary colors and your tertiary colors so that you are using your paint most effectively, and then usually do monochromatic at the end. And then just a couple of general tips on tempera techniques for you. First one, with the yellow. Oftentimes with yellow paint, it is least pigmented, so the ratio of the binder or medium of the paint to the pigment that they use for it is very different from what the other colors are. So oftentimes the yellow ends up being very underpowered. So when you go to mix out those colors that need yellow, usually what I'd recommend is start out with majority yellow and then add a little bit of those other colors. So when I'm going to mix an orange, I'm using majority yellow, mixing in like a dot of red at a time so that I have more control over that mixture. Whereas if I go with half and half, very literally, I'm essentially going to have a very overpowered it's going to essentially just be red. You're going to have a little bit of that like kind of orange tint, but it's going to remain mainly red. So I'd say when you use those mixtures, especially with yellow, just be mindful, use the majority yellow and then slowly mix those in. Kind of same thing with your white. It's typically very underpowered, and mix in just little bits at a time. And then the other thing that I would say to keep in mind is as you're working and as you switch colors, use that paper towel to really clear out the water from your brushes. Since Tempera is such a viscous paint where it is very runny, you don't really need to add more water to it. And it can get to the point where it's a little bit hard to control. So I would say anytime you're switching colors, anytime you're cleaning out your brush, just make sure you're gonna really getting that dried out, using that paper towel to get that water out of your brush before you move on. And then for the last section with monochromatic, this is looking at those one color plus your value, so including black and white. So usually what I recommend with this one is start in the middle, kind of start with that base shade of that color you're picking out, and then you're going to work from that middle point over into your lighter tints of that color, and then on the other side working in adding black to get the shades of that color. And then like I mentioned, your white is typically very underpowered. When you start out, it can be helpful to eventually start to switch over and start to move from majority white and then start to mix into red. So just kind of be mindful of that combination. And then with the reverse of that, black is typically very overpowering in comparison to the other colors. So I would say kind of start with your base red and then move over into very slowly adding in that black. And then with this, you don't have to do red. You can do any shade. I would say probably work with the shade that you have the most amount of paint left with at the end. You can also do this with a secondary or tertiary color as well too. So it doesn't matter too much. And then with this, if you do have spots where it just gets a little bit too light or dark, you can always kind of recalibrate, leave some of that spacing open, and then adjust as you need to. Otherwise, that should be it for the sheet itself. For cleanup, for the Stretch and Explore sheet, make sure that you get your name on there. Just somewhere on that top is fine. Then what I'll have you do is, if you've been using a correct amount of paint, you'll notice that the Tempera is very fast drying. This should be mostly dry when you get it in your storage. That said, if you were a little bit more heavy-handed with your paint and it's still really, really wet, bring it over to me. I'll have you get it in the drying rack for overnight, and then we'll just grab that tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll go in storage. If you're not done with it, just have it in there. And then if you are finished and it's still wet, I'll have you get it in your storage as well too. And then other things to clean up, you're going to take your palette and the jar of water and your brush over, or brushes over to the sink. For this cleanup, just kind of keep in mind that we are going to essentially wash out the remainder paint. So do try to grab small amounts so that we're not having a lot of that go down the sink. When you go to clean that up, you're just going to use the scrubbies that are over there. If you need to help kind of just get some of that paint off your palette, and then with your brush, either rubbing that either on one of those scrubbies or on the bottom of the sink to clear out that remnant paint. And then once you have both of those washed, you're going to bring those back over. And then what you're going to do is you're going to essentially pat dry your brush, get that in the bag. And then same thing with the palette, just kind of get it dried off. At this point, if you have any paint that got on the table, you can also use that paper towel just to get that removed as well. If you had a bit more of a mess, you can also grab one of the spray bottles that are by the sinks. And then last couple things, once those are dry, you're going to get those collected. Brushes will go back in that bag. If you use more than one brush or they're still kind of damp, you can leave that bag open, otherwise get it sealed back up. And then you're just going to return those to your storage, and then you'll pull those out tomorrow. And then just as a reminder for you, painting is a privilege. It is not an essential part of the curriculum for this class. So if you cannot continue to demonstrate and show me that you can clean up after yourself, if I have to clean up after you 3 times, then what we'll do is we're going to check back in your palette, your brushes, and then you'll just do crayon for this project. So just make sure you're taking care of your stuff. It saves me a ton of time if I'm not having to constantly clean through the sinks, and it makes everyone a lot happier during the painting units if it's not consistently messy. So just make sure you are cleaning up after yourself. like I mentioned, 3 times and then it's out. So if I'm continuously finding your stuff in the sinks or noticing you're not cleaning up, then we'll have that conversation. But that is all the information I have for you. So you are good to start on this sheet. If you happen to miss one of those written answers, come talk to me. I can help clarify those. Otherwise, just make sure that you're getting those written down from the lecture. Save yourself of having to look up that information later on a different day if you weren't paying attention. But you are good to go. Holler if you have questions.